Folks, folks, do you remember the old show Mythbusters? I do. It was one of my favorites growing up. Dave, I think you said it was one of your favorites too. And
Yep.
We were going to do a typical mailbag Monday, but as we were looking through the mailbag, so many questions related to conference realignment. Except for one, microventure funding, I am going to get you an answer on on how we would rate the top 10 players on the new NCAA game. You boys had COVID, so I haven't had time to do that yet, but I'll get that for you. And we decided today we should combine two of our favorite things, conference realignment talk and our favorite show. So we are going to play Conference Realignment Mythbusters. And then after this episode, we are going to put conference realignment to bed until something else pops. Davey boy, let's dive into it.
Let's do it.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Folks, welcome to Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Max Moody, and right there we've got David Weiss. Andres could not join us today. As we said last week, he will be taking over main hosting duties, but today I'm filling back in. So we're going to play Conference Realignment Mythbusters. Before we do that, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube. Make sure that you ding the bell to turn on notifications. Give a 5-star review on Apple Pods, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the podcast. All that stuff helps tremendously. Like I said, I've been sick all weekend, got hit with the COVID, and I am up and I am here because I absolutely love doing this. And y'all coming back over and over again lets me do what I love. So I appreciate that. Now, conference realignment, Dave, I mean, it's been the talk of the town.
Yep.
And I don't want to say we've looked kind of smart, but I will point listeners back to our earlier episodes where there was one person or one show, that was us, right, who didn't pretend to take phone calls from sources in the middle of a impromptu Twitter video. You know who you are. And we said, look, this is going to be a lot like 2012. A lot of action, a lot of motion, and very little progress. Okay. So since the news broke about UCLA and USC, two teams moving to the Big Ten, Dave, I believe we have seen exactly two teams move conferences, and that's UCLA and USC. So all the rumors, all the speculation, all the this, all the that, well, has come to a lot of nothing. Does that mean nothing will ever happen? Absolutely not.
Definitely
That's
not.
not what we're saying. But we are saying we probably, people were freaking out a bit. And again, we'd like to put it to bed with today's episode of Conference Realignment Mythbusters. These are based on listener questions that you all sent to us. So please send in listener questions and we will get to them. But David, what is the first conference realignment myth that we want to discuss?
Okay. So the ACC held a press conference, if you didn't see it, and the ACC commissioner talked an awful lot about how we can remain competitive and how we keep the national landscape of college football just doing well. That probably pissed a lot of people off. And judging by the comments, a lot of people are worried about, will FSU and the ACC be able to remain competitive? And specifically, you hear a lot of people say things like the SEC teams are making 2-3 times as much as ACC teams. So I guess just as a general starter question, is it fact, is it myth, or is it not myth that the SEC teams right now under our current TV contracts are making 2 to 3 times as much as ACC teams?
Great question, Dave. So the current numbers we have found through our research, please correct us if we're wrong, but conferences are not publicly traded companies. They do disclose revenues, but they aren't required to give tons and tons of detail. They don't file a Form 10. They don't do things like that. We have found that the most recent disclosures, which would be fiscal year 21, which includes the COVID season, has the ACC revenues total at $578 million and the SEC revenues at $777 million. Now, yes, that is a big jump. If we do a percentage on it, that's a 35% increase. Per team, That means the average ACC team is bringing in from that split, if they're doing it evenly, roughly $41 million. If we look at what the average SEC team's bringing in, just double check that math real quick because I'd done 41. The average SEC team is bringing in 55.56. That's a decent split, Dave.
Yep.
Now, I think the first myth, that's the first myth. I think the thing about it is, how do we fix that problem?
Yep.
Because so much is swirled about, can we get out of the grant of rights? Can this happen? Blah, blah, blah. There's a few things I want to get there, but I want to bring you guys our hardest hitting piece first, our number one thing that other shows are not telling you. And that is, could unequal revenue sharing work?
Yeah.
And my answer is yes. Yes, it could. Will it work long-term? Absolutely not. But we did some math today. Math is fun, right, Dave?
So much fun.
You love it when I have to sit there and do it. And here's what it works out to. Of the 14 teams in the ACC, each team will get roughly 7%, that's 1/14 of the revenue that the ACC brings in. That's what creates that $14 million delta between an ACC team and an SEC team. Now, the SEC is not going to go to unequal revenue share. So how do you make up that $14 million? Well, simply put, you take some from the schools that aren't contributing, right? What we would call the free rider problem in economics, and you give it to the schools that are driving the income. Now, the first thing I've heard a couple things, but the biggest thing you'll hear nationally is, it didn't work for the Pac-12. Very true. But there were more things at play than the Pac-12, or in the Pac-12. It wasn't just the revenue share issue. It was the fact that UCLA, we've now found out, was what, David, like 2 years from having to completely shut down all their athletic programs?
Yep. Pretty bad.
They didn't have any money, and this was their lifeline. USC going there was agreed to by UCLA, and UCLA came with because they needed a bailout. That's not the case with our top earners. Our top earners, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, then kind of all the rest, I guess NC State,
Louisville.
UNC are in there, Louisville, whatever. They don't need bailouts at the moment. The other argument is, why would these schools agree to an unequal revenue share? Because they're riding a gravy train. You know what I find is funny, Dave?
Tell me.
I've heard the exact same people during the exact same show say, on one hand, why would a school agree to an unequal revenue share? And then go on to say, but I think the smaller schools in the ACC will leave and start their own thing. What?
That's called the AAC.
Right, but here's the thing, and this is the next myth we're going to bust, by the way, is going to be this: how do we get out of the grant of rights thing by the ACC just dissolving? Why? You're telling me a school like Wake Forest that brings in no money. No one watches a Wake Forest football game, by the way.
No one.
Go look at their numbers for when they play an out-of-conference team. No one tunes in. So the number I came up with is, sorry for being a bit scattered, but the number I came up with is, you would have, if you cut the bottom 9 teams in the ACC, so team 6 through team 14, if you took their piece of the pie from 7% down to 5%, they would still earn $33 million each off of $578 million in revenue. And that would be enough. The pool that would create would be enough to bring the top 5 ACC schools up to making $56 million each. So you're telling me, if I go to Wake Forest tomorrow and I say, Wake, right now you're making $41 million. You haven't earned a cent of that. It's all free. You just get it for getting your head kicked in year after year. And every now and then you have an amazing year and we're all really happy for you. And you get a good old pat on the back. We just need you to drop that down to $33 million, which, by the way, they only have 5,000 students. So per student, they're making out like freaking bandits. And we can keep Florida State, Clemson, Louisville, it probably wouldn't be Louisville. It'd probably be Florida State, Clemson, Miami. And would it be Louisville or NC State, do you think?
Probably Louisville.
Maybe both of those if we're letting 5 in, right?
Yeah.
And we can keep them happy until 2036. Of course, you're going to say yes to that if you're Wake Forest or if you're Boston College or if you're Syracuse, Because the other option is these guys find a way to get out early and you get nothing.
Yeah, therein lies the problem. What exactly are the other options at this point? Like the ACC's top teams are so far. I mean, it's not double. We debunked that myth. It's not double. It's not triple.
It's projected, right? It's all about projections. People are saying, oh, with Texas in, with Oklahoma. Yeah, it will, by the way. We're not going to catch up to that. I'm saying for what it is right now, I'm debunking the myth that unequal revenue share is just, there's no way it could possibly get you in the ballpark. It could. All you have to do is knock the bottom 9 teams down from a 7% share to a 5% share, and you can get your top 5 teams on par with what the SEC made last year, which is a whole lot better than you're projected to do right now.
And like the thing I hear a lot in response to that is, well, maybe the ACC just fortifies itself and adds some of the other teams from these other conferences that have basically fallen apart. The problem is, who the hell do we want from the Pac-12 other than Oregon? And like Phil Knight's already on the line trying to get them in the Big Ten or the SEC for sure. And who the hell in the Big 12 do we want? And it's not just who we want. The question at this point is, who could we add that would significantly add that much more revenue to the ACC, such that splitting the pie another way or 2 ways would even be worth it? I don't know that team exists out there. Who? Maybe Oklahoma State, maybe in a good year.
And those are the next myths we're going to get to on this episode of Mailbag Monday Mythbusters. But first, folks, let me tell you about LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs is the way to go. Do you need a job? Do you want a job? You want to make a little more money? Do you have a job and need to hire someone that's qualified to do that job? There's only one place you should be going, and it's LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn may have started as like a social media just so you could tell people what job you had and, kind of, let's be honest, humble brag about your accomplishments. But it's become so much more than that. I know I got my job through LinkedIn Jobs. I've watched my firm hire tons of people through LinkedIn Jobs. I know that my friends with small businesses now use that over any other site out there, simply because when a candidate applies, you can quickly see their network. You can see where they went to school. You can see if you have people in common. It makes it easy to reach out to employers and all kinds of other stuff. So LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. And did you guys know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Folks, thanks for rocking and rolling with us. We appreciate you, especially when we get math heavy. But, I got really fired up about the point of it's not a long-term solution, but some amount of unequal revenue sharing can help us in the short term, especially if we're stuck here until 2036. The myth that's been percolating, because he had a Freudian slip where he said 17 teams. He said the 17 teams in the ACC. Well, for those of you counting at home, there's only 14. So clearly he's looking at adding teams.
Yep. There's
this myth that if we added teams, that would reopen everything. Everything's back. Boom, boom. Package is open and we're good. We're out. We can get out of the grant of rights. Dave, you're an attorney with extensive experience in contract law. I will say none of this is legal advice.
Yep.
I know it's annoying, but because of the Florida, New York, and Georgia bars, yes, we do actually have to say that. We're not joking. This is not legal advice, but as an attorney looking at the situation, how do you feel about the validity of the myth that if they bring in more teams, we're allowed to just get out of there?
Yeah, that seems pretty frivolous at every level. Like, for example, if the ACC were to add USF, you're telling me that suddenly Clemson and Florida State can just leave with impunity? Or suddenly ESPN's gonna be so jazzed up about adding USF that they're gonna give us $100 million more. No, that's not gonna happen. And I don't think there's any validity to the notion, to answer your question specifically, that adding teams reopens the ability to renegotiate or anything like that, or just lets Florida State or Clemson off the hook in terms of being stuck in their grant of rights. The grant of rights, as you know, allows the conference to negotiate with TV stations deals and how much money they're going to make. It just takes the school's ability to do that themselves away. We can't just be like Notre Dame and go to NBC and say, we want this much money for our TV rights. The ACC has that right. And adding teams doesn't just change that suddenly.
Yeah, that would be a very bizarre thing. So again, I'm not an attorney, but as you all may know, if you've listened before, I'm a mergers and acquisitions consultant, and I've never heard of a deal where in a holding company, which is essentially, right, Dave, what this is. A conference is effectively a holding company negotiating almost with a third-party marketing firm to distribute their media is kind of the best best analog. If I'm one vertical of a holding company, like let's say whatever, I forget what it was called, but there used to be a holding company that owned Titleist Golf Clubs, FootJoy, and Jim Beam.
Yeah.
Okay. When that company, if they decided to buy Mountain Dew, Jim Beam doesn't just get to go, you bought another company, I'm going to leave now.
Right.
No, that's still your parent company. They still own the rights to use whatever marketing firm they want to market Jim Beam. I know it's a bit of a loose analogy, but adding teams, I don't think there has ever been a contract in the history of contracts, if we think about this logically,
right,
that would allow the highest revenue earning elements of a business to void a contract with the business because the business was making a move that supposedly was increasing the value of all of the businesses. You don't get to just leave a contract because the person you're contracting with is acting in your best interest, because that's their job, is to act in your best interest. Now, Dave, where I think we have a bigger problem is, are there any schools that aren't going to be part of this bottom 9 I mentioned? I mean, we look at I'm going to use some finance terms because I like to feel smart. Let's look at what the hurdle rate here is. A hurdle rate is just, what does an investment have to clear to make it worth the time, energy, money, whatever we call it, the weighted alternate cost of capital. If the average team in the current structure is getting $41.29 million from the ACC, Dave, what schools in the country are going to contribute at least $41.29 million per year to this conference? Because if they're not contributing at least that, then they're just getting a bigger piece of a pie that they're not expanding.
And the irony is that they end up being one of those schools who we would want to ask to reduce their revenue to give it back to the top players in the conference. Let's do that list, actually. There's not many of them. It's a really easy list. In the Pac-12, it's Oregon.
Yes.
Obviously.
Maybe Stanford.
Just because they have more money than God. If you ever want a fun exercise,
but are they a TV draw though?
No, but go look how much money they have. I don't know that,
agreed.
It's just bizarre. I mean, I probably not. I don't want Stanford. Oregon, yeah.
To me, it's a few schools. I should have looked this up before. Again, I apologize, folks. I do get sick. I'm just mortal. To me, it's a few schools that could maybe do it.
It's OK State is one, right? Like that's an
Oklahoma State, right?
Yeah.
And maybe Kansas because of basketball, but asking for that kind of revenue contribution because of basketball. Yeah. Sorry, I think they'd be a value add because of basketball. They wouldn't make $41.29 million for the conference. And again, we want revenue to increase. West Virginia is the other name that gets kicked around. They have a passionate fan base. I think culturally they'd be a great fit. Yeah. I would love to see that renewed rivalry, West Virginia and Pitt. Like, I have a farm in West Virginia, so I grew up going there a lot as a kid. Like, but they're not bringing in the money we need them to bring in.
That idea weren't they kicked around as an idea when we did our most recent expansion?
I think so. Yeah.
Louisville. Yeah. And that does kind of make sense. The only other one I could think would be maybe Baylor. There's some baggage.
They're small,
to adding
private,
Baylor, and I know, but they're right now that every now and then they become a big football draw, and they obviously have champion women's basketball teams. Their men's basketball team gets good. Like,
well, they won champion. Their men's basketball team won a championship 2 years ago, right?
Right, but I mean, that's not historically they've not been like a championship level men's basketball team. But yeah, I mean, that's the only other school. That is the list of schools I can think of, other than Notre Dame, obviously. That would be worth adding, and that's not a big list. And even some of those, we can't guarantee
Right.
would add enough revenue such that Florida State would earn more because of adding those teams.
Agreed. The only other one, Dave, I would add to the list, and I know that they're now sort of spoken for, and this is a long-term play, would be UCF, because growing alumni
Right.
base, and I don't think they would bring in the 41 whatever million right now, but they would be the type of team where I think playing them frequently would increase the viewership for us, Clemson, NC State, teams in the area that play them. Those games would, like if you replaced the Syracuse game with a UCF game every year, I do think our net viewership would go up, right, for across the season.
I do it too. Yep.
So I think maybe a team like that. I don't think USF, frankly, USF had their time and they weren't able to capitalize. This hurts me to say, but UCF was able to keep. They've been able to keep it going across now 3 head coaches, right? It wasn't just what was the gentleman's name? A Blake Bortles phenomenon. It was like Blake Bortles, and then they had Milton, and then they had Gabriel. Like they've been able to keep it rolling. So maybe them, but let's just say busted or confirmed. Is there a way, 2 myths here, busted or confirmed. Number 1, can the ACC trying to add programs be a backdoor for Florida State and Clemson to get out of the grant of rights? Busted or confirmed. There are a whole bunch of teams out there that we can just add and we can grow our way out of this and compete with the Big Ten and the SEC.
Absolutely busted. And let me add one more question for you to kind of round this out. How many teams would you like to kick out of the ACC because of
9.
the fact? Is it real? Like Virginia Tech's not one of those we mentioned earlier. I want them in the ACC. They've obviously been at the highest level of college football. They haven't been recently, but I suspect they can get back there. That's the kind of team I would like to keep. But how many would you actually really want kicked out of the conference because they're sharing too much?
Okay, so let's go through. Let's just say, you know what? Let's play Claudius. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Boston College, in or out? Out. Clemson, in or out? In. Duke, in or out? Now they're in for basketball for me. We got to think holistically a little bit. Well, you know what? No, are we talking only football?
Only football.
Like we're basically saying, you know what? Basketball is going to be its own thing. Like how the Big East is still a basketball conference.
Yes.
Fine, they're out. Florida State, in. Georgia Tech.
Oh, kick us out. Please kick us out.
Well, no, but I'm saying we're saying if we had to,
Sure.
Okay. Georgia Tech's out. Louisville. I'm keeping Louisville.
In.
Miami.
In.
NC State.
In.
Interesting one here. North Carolina.
Recently, they've been good.
But will they ever care about football? Will they ever have that level of dedication? Like, I think if they got the money from all of us making more money, to be honest, this is bad journalism. I would have to further research what they bring in from a football perspective.
The only thing I'll say is it feels an awful lot like they got their Jameis Winston and they did the most they could out of that. I don't expect that to happen. Not that Sam Howell is Jameis Winston. He's not. But
he was theirs.
They got their generational quarterback.
They got their EJ Manuel, or they got their Christian Ponder. And we'll see if they can follow up with an EJ, and we'll see if they can get a Jameis. Yeah. I think he was their Christian Ponder. That would be my comp for Sam Howell.
At the end of the day, it's a no for me.
Okay. I'll put them as 10. If Pittsburgh, no desire to have them in this conference. Syracuse, no. Virginia, love the academics. No, from dude.
It's like a Stanford play.
Virginia just had the nation's third leading passer, and no one heard about it.
Yeah, that is definitely true.
Folks, I'm not kidding. Virginia's quarterback last year threw for the third most yards in the country, and no one listening to this knows about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Because no one cares about Virginia football.
It's like Stanford in a lot of ways. Probably a no for me. Yeah.
Are we keeping? We'd keep Virginia Tech, right?
We're keeping Virginia Tech for sure.
Wake Forest is out.
Oh yeah, that's
1,
one of my first.
2, 3.
Do we say
4,
Syracuse?
5. Yep. 6, 7. So that's 7 schools that we feel like are above the free rider problem. And again, I'd have to look at these numbers. So that's
half the conference.
That's half.
Yeah.
So now we get to our final myth. We can end the grant of rights via mutiny. If enough schools leave, the grant of rights is null and void. That is 100% true. That is confirmed. That is not a myth. Here's what is a myth and what we are going to try to confirm or dispel right now, David Weiss, before we let the people go about their day? Because we've already shown that there is some merit to unequal revenue sharing, because you may be stuck here till 2036, and there is a way to get you at least 12, 13 million extra per team in the top 5, while also giving the lower schools enough that it makes sense for them to just accept it because they couldn't do better on their own.
Yep.
Okay. We've dispelled the myth. We have busted the myth that if you bring in new teams, you just get a get out of jail free card. It doesn't work like that, because you have given the conference the rights to negotiate with the TV stations. So a new negotiation with the TV stations on your behalf is what the conference is supposed to be doing.
Yep.
So the final myth is the mutiny myth. It's been confirmed that if enough teams leave, I believe it's a majority, so we would need 8 at this point, we can all of a sudden call it a day. We're good. We can go to the Big Ten, the SEC. Here's what we have to talk about.
Yeah.
Who the hell's going to take these teams?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to quote Ari Gold. No, I'm not, because I like my career, and that guy has become problematic over time. But it's like, who's going to take these teams? I mean, we just went by it, and let's sort real quick. Love Excel. Let's sort A to Z right now, the teams that we said were in, and you tell me if you think they would have a home in another conference.
Yeah.
Clemson, yes or no?
For sure.
Florida State, yes or no?
For sure.
Louisville, yes or no?
Yes.
Who? I mean, really,
I don't know. They feel like a Big Ten kind of
But that's
team.
what happens. It's name syndrome. Oh, yeah, of course. But really, who's taking? But right now, as of today, is the Big Ten knocking on the door to sign Louisville? They're not an AAU school.
I still think yes.
AAC, was it AAC? American Association of Colleges, Universities?
I have no idea.
The thing that they all like, right? That we talk about nonstop. Again, guys, COVID brain, I'm doing my best here. I don't know if Louisville can find a home right now. Can Miami? Miami could, I imagine, right?
Yeah,
someone has to want the
national
Miami
brand.
market, right?
Yeah.
Like, as much as it annoys us, someone wants that market.
That's right.
But NC State.
No.
So here's my thing. In the North Carolina market is growing, right? North Carolina, if you look at the metrics, I think is one of the faster growing states in the country.
Yep.
The research triangle is booming. Lots of young people moving to Charlotte, people moving to Raleigh, Durham. But you don't need 2.
Yep.
You only need 1 school there. So the question becomes, you have North Carolina and you have NC State. Does the Big Ten grab one and the SEC grab one?
Probably.
Because I think they both, that would be my argument, is like SEC would go for NC State, Big Ten would go for UNC. So I'd give them both a yes, but Virginia Tech, I think, is an SEC, right? Natural rivalry with Tennessee, all that. But in one more Mythbusters fashion, and one final juicy contradiction, Dave, is like, are these conferences really clamoring to expand?
Well, I mean, it depends on the whole big picture here thing. Like, if the SEC and Big Ten have set up an interesting scenario where they can almost completely control the college football landscape. Like, if they were to add the remaining players left of just the scraps that haven't been affected by conference realignment, like they were to add Oregon and Florida State, these teams we've talked about, all of the major players in college football would be within those conferences, and they could effectively make everything else just moot, right? Like,
sure, but right now they're already doing that. They're already making more money than everyone else. So why? I guess my question that I swear I haven't heard anyone else ask: why rush it? If you're planning to have 6 kids, do you really want to pop out sextuplets?
It's one of those things where you're scared that you're gonna. I think you're probably scared you're gonna miss out. But then again, like, I don't think the SEC has that concern that, like, Florida State, if they don't get their offer now, is never going to join, or Clemson.
Exactly.
Like, they know good and damn well we're going to join the moment we get an invitation.
So let's touch on that for a second, right? Because you're right. Here's the fears. You've got 2 superpowers, right? And the fear is, if we don't take Florida State now, the Big Ten will.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's like there's enough brands out there. Like, we just looked here. I don't know if either the SEC or the Big Ten care enough about getting one of these specific brands from the ACC that are desirable, as much as they just care that the other conference doesn't get all 6 or 7. And they know the other conference isn't taking all 6 or 7 right now, because they don't want to have to deal with all the grant of rights BS and all this nonsense So until I take my 3 or 4, they can't take their 3 or 4. So we can also both just chill till 2036, let our entrenched members, make more money, let our newer members acclimate to the conference, figure out what the schedule is going to look like and do all that. And then they know once they make that offer, we're going to take it. So is there really an advantage to doing this massive land grab? Or is that what we as ACC fans want to hear because we want to get the hell out of this conference?
Definitely the second thing. But I mean, I don't know. Like for the first part of the first question, the only other thing I can think of is like, if you want to really consolidate your power right now and just land the biggest TV deal you can before ESPN goes off the rails and just isn't worth anything anymore because they haven't made the right decisions creatively or strategically or whatever. I don't know. Lock your big TV deal in. Not like the ACC does or did, but like if the SEC were to add FSU and Clemson, those are value adds. Like they can up negotiate their contract with ESPN. They would. Florida State sucks, and we are still one of the biggest draws on television. That's another myth, by the way.
True, except then they're going to have to loan us the money well, first of all, they won't own our rights until 2036 if everyone else doesn't leave. So they're betting that 6 other teams, if they only take 2, they're betting 6 other ACC teams will find landing places, which we only found 6 that have landing places, and that's a stretch.
And the other problem,
and they're going to have to pay us the money for the conference buyout, which is 3x annual television revenue. Now that I said is a moot point because that's only going to get more expensive, but that is a huge upfront spend when you could just wait till 2036.
Yeah, and here's the other problem to me, and this I think is my last point. How many ACC teams really want to leave? Like, I think Florida State and Clemson do want to, but how many of the rest of them, like of the teams we named that maybe could find landing homes, how many of them actually want to leave?
Is Louisville in a huge rush to? I mean, obviously they all want more money, right?
But to do this mutiny you talked about,
right?
We didn't come up with 8 landing spots, and I think the list of how many want to leave is even less. Like the idea, the allure of more money, that's always great. But I think, like for example, at Virginia Tech, they've been here forever. Like I don't think they're clamoring to just up and drastically change.
Yeah. They've done it once, right? What? No, 405. They had to do the move thing.
Yeah.
Like, are they really going to want to? I don't know. I think that's a very valid question. I can't speak to it. I don't know enough to I haven't thought of it through that lens yet. But you're right. Like it's like more to me. The way I look at it is again, more money sounds appealing to everyone. But are there a bunch of people lining up to give us more money? Us and Clemson may be, but only if we can break down the grant of rights, which we can't unless a bunch of other teams that, no offense, no one else wants leave. And the problem too, Dave, what you're getting at when you say, and I think this is what you're getting at, so correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth. A lot of these teams would be leaving for conferences where they'd make less money.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest myth. I guess the last one that we'll close is, all these teams would leave and they'd go start their own conference, or they'd go start an Ivy League equivalent, or they would go to the Big 12. Why, if you're Duke, Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Virginia, Wake Forest, would you actively go make less money when you can have a free ride on the gravy train till 2036 and then go make less money?
Yeah, and you know what network they're going to end up having to negotiate that TV deal with the scraps of the Pac-12 and Big 12?
Fubo.tv. Oh, yeah.
Either one.
But yeah, right. In all seriousness, it's like, well, they may just decide that they don't want to do all this and compete in D1 football. They may. But why not do that after you've gotten your longest possible free ride? It makes no sense to me. Yep. But Dave, thank you for rocking and rolling with me today. I'm glad we got to do some myth busting on this mailbag. Micro venture funding, I promise. I'll get you an answer about the NCAA ratings. I loved that question. It's going to take me a minute to work through it. I hope you all have a wonderful Monday whenever you're listening to this, Monday afternoon. Hope you have a wonderful Monday morning if it's the morning. And again, thanks for stopping by and letting us do what we love doing, because we only get to do it because you do what you do. So make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, like the video, all that good stuff. I'm Max, that was Dave, and this was Locked On Seminoles.
Go Yankees.